Hello, and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. Tonight we are discussing The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Yay!
Yay.
uh, Before we get into that, you can find us on all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as OneGeek411. Come chat with us on our Discord server or shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch live on our Twitch every Monday night at 6:45 Mountain Time and find all our videos over on YouTube. And make sure to also check out our Redbubble store. I'm Shanine, and with me I have Pirate Emma.
Yes, I'm wearing a pirate hat for all listeners.
And regular Cameron.
Yar. I'm very jealous of Emma's pirate hat, just for the record.
Hey, sometimes you just gotta get a little bit on brand, on theme.
Yeah. Sidetracking us immediately. Shanine saw Ren Fair pirate costume Cameron, and I have been looking for a really cool pirate hat, and I just cannot find one that calls to me. And so I've been to like multiple or the ones that I can find that call to me are like $400. I'm like, that's a bit steep. So that's the struggle.
My whole pirate fit. There's pictures foot. But I'm just going with the hat for today.
All right. So, to hop into it, Amina Al-Sirafi is a retired pirate captain with a lot of secrets and maybe a few enemies. She wants to live a quiet life with her daughter, but the mother of one of her dead crewmen tracks her down and threatens Amina into rescuing her granddaughter. What Amina is led to believe is a straightforward kidnapping by a foreigner turns out to be a runaway teenager who doesn't want to go home, magical items of folklore becoming reality, reuniting with her demon husband, battles with a powerful sorcerer, attacks from a giant sea creature, washing up ashore a psychedelic supernatural island, and making deals with murdery bird gods. The already infamous, soon to be legendary Nakuda, alongside her friends and some tenuous alliances, defeats the foreign sorcerer, but not without being eternally altered and having a quiet retirement put off for a little bit longer. All right. 3-word review.
Fabulous pirate story.
Yeah, fun pirate story.
So obsessed. Pirates.
Much
We
pirate.
love pirate.
Mini wow.
All the pirates.
All right. I think both of you read the audio book, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
I did, primarily the audiobook, but switched between hard.
Nice. So people who had the physical copy also got a fancy fantasy map. Is very fun. And this story takes place largely in the Indian Ocean and surrounding land areas. What were your thoughts on the setting and the world building?
Yep.
Pirates in general, which I feel like setting. But to a big fan, so anything ocean, especially fabulous.
Emma, can you check which input you have just real quick? You're cutting in and out for me. And I'll say I loved this other take on pirates. Like, obviously pirates are not regional to the Caribbean, but like that's been such like a part of pop culture, especially the last like, I don't know, 20 years, 15 years, however long that's been. So it's really cool to see a pirate story centered on a different part of the world. And just kind of getting that the different sides of it. Like we'll talk faith a bit later on in one of the other questions, but like it was cool having a story set with different world building in air quotes, but like it's our world, but like it was very cool just to kind of see that same themes, same ideas, but presented in a different way.
I'm doing a testing test. See if I'm breaking. Hello, hello, hello.
It's better. Yeah.
Great. I mean, that's really all I can do.
That's all we can. Yeah, that's all we can hope for.
Yep.
For me, I think this is probably the first book I've read set in this area of the world that I can remember, anyways. Um, so that in and of itself was very interesting, seeing just like a little bit of the culture and like the folklore and stuff from that part of the world. And I think, yeah, the world building was very fun as well. Obviously, she researched this heavily and like shared a lot of the stuff that she researched as for like real world history and pirates and things, but also a lot of like the folklore and fantasy elements from that part of the world as well. This is really fun seeing how she wove those together to tell this story.
Yeah. Was there an appendix at the end for the physical book?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that I really liked from the appendix is I think the quote from Shannon is like the goal was for it to be as historically accurate as possible minus the magic. And like that's such a fun take of it's like obviously there's demons and magical worlds and all of that, but like even the way that like she refers to people groups is how they would have been referred to in that time. Like it was very cool to kind of have this like well researched historical fiction.
I love good reach in fiction, even magic.
Okay, for those of us who read in different formats, how was the experience?
The audiobook in this case is fabulous. I normally prefer reading the physical book, but the audiobook was so well produced and so fun in this case that I much preferred listening to it than reading it. I mean, obviously I have the physical book as well, to like take notes and things, but the audiobook was a lot of fun, and it felt almost like listening to a fiction podcast. So highly recommend.
Yeah, I really liked the distinction between I mean like it's a book about someone telling a story and another person writing those down. And so I really liked that, like when we get Jamal's like interjections, like in the audiobook, it's not just like a different font or something different. Like it's a completely different voice that like plays really well. It might actually have been a different person. I'm not 100% sure if it was. I'm trying to get there to check. But I really liked, yes, I believe it says there are two narrators. So yes, I'm pretty sure it was two different people, not just like one person doing two very distinct voices. But I thought that was really cool. It really plays up the, like whenever those like interludes happen, like having a completely different voice for Jamal was very cool and kind of helps with that. Setting apart what is the modern like recounting versus the story that they're telling. And I always enjoy when audiobooks can do that in a way that's distinct, because that's easy to communicate on paper, but can be harder to communicate in an audio medium. And so I
Mm-hmm.
definitely appreciate the extra production to make that clear for us.
Yeah. I only read the physical version and I think it was great. I think um, from what you guys said, the audiobook sounded really good, and I wish that I had had the opportunity to listen to it as well. But I think this story is just as good being read.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And I'll say that I feel like a good audiobook, like having a good audiobook doesn't save a bad story. Like you
Mm-mm.
can put all the production into it, but like I really think like to what you just said, Shanine, it's like this is a great story, and the audiobook like elevated that. Um, Versus like again, I'll go to my classic Baron and Luthien as like the worst audiobook experience I've ever had. Of like I think that would have been an interesting read, but it was not elevated by the audiobook. But the story here plays so well to the pirate stories and all of these tales, these like seemingly not exaggerated stories as like
Mm-hmm.
we're getting into all of this. It just felt so like we're sitting around the campfire and listening to Amina tell these stories. And it was such a cool way of taking this cool story and putting it in a fun way.
yes, and as you mentioned as well, we have this story in the framework of a scribe writing down the adventures of Amina, as well as some interjections of other little tidbits from like legend and things as well. What did you guys think of the framework of the story?
I really liked it. Um, One of my favorite series also does that same framework, the Name of the Wind books. And I think if it's done well, it's great. It really adds a lot to the story. And this is those scenarios where it felt it really added a lot because like you have the main character looking back on the scenario that happened. Hindsight is 2020. Like I shouldn't have done that or whatever. But uh, that's what happened potentially. Um, and then you have this other character who's writing it all down, who is sort of interjecting and contributing to clarify things. And it's really great in this case. I loved it.
Yeah. It reminded me a lot of Dune. Like I'm a sucker for like in world like history, in world like things uh like history books that exist in the story itself being referenced. I always think that that's really cool, and having these interludes to kind of like going back to what you said earlier, Shanine, of like I'm not familiar with the legends of this part of the world, and so this is similar to you, probably the first book that I've read set in the Indian Ocean, and so it's really cool to have those kind of explain the stories that are going on, whether they are literally like real myths or whether they are things created for the story itself. It was very cool to kind of have that background provided versus like we're so familiar with like Greek and Roman mythology that like I can talk about a minotaur and we all know what that means. But
Yeah.
like a lot of the stuff in this book like did not have a like necessarily a basis for. And so having these like interludes from Jamal was definitely very helpful, and kind of gives great context.
Yeah, I think it was a great format for exposition as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that could have got really like dialogue heavy or like
Mm-hmm.
and now we're delivering exposition.
Mm-hmm.
But instead it was like, ooh, like a fun little like story aside or like a little like rumor that we get a glimpse of. Like, yeah, It was fun.
You get another version of the story behind this mythical object we're looking for.
Yeah. And I think the having the background of this being the scribe taking down the story had like some humorous moments as well, where he'd be like in the middle of the story and suddenly it'd be like, don't give me that look. And then like keep going. And you're like, oh, right. This is like literally Amina telling the story right now. It's funny.
Yeah, like there's one where like Amina gets like chided for cussing.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is how we talk. Like, you're gonna have to deal with this if you want to hear my account of things. And I'm like, that's so good.
This is how it goes. You have to put up with it.
All right. So, what are our thoughts on our sweary Captain Amina as a character, captain, and mother?
I thought she was great and well written sort of version of an older pirate captain who just wants to be home with her family, but who gets dragged back into the chaos for the sake of her daughter. And like returns to that life because of family. And I want more of that kind of character in pirate stories. She's like older and has experience in that, and we see normally a lot of young men and women charging off to be pirates and like learning how that whole process happens. But in this case, we have someone who's been doing that for a while who's like, I don't want to, but I'm being forced to. And it's all because she wants what's best for her daughter, and she takes care of her people as a result.
I also like that as a pirate story, this is not like a person running away from their duties. Like that, I feel like a lot of pirate stories kind of become of like, oh, I want to set sail, I want to explore the ocean. Like I love this. Like I love that Amina is an older person who has had this life and is trying to leave it behind, but is very good and has a very particular set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
And like she just gets pulled back in all for the safety of her daughter. And I like that quest is, or like that the quest doesn't take away her wanting to be a good mother, but like it kind of just gets hammered home throughout the story that like if you walk away, this is not going to work out. Like you can't. Yeah. It's not shirking that responsibility of parenthood. It's her trying to protect her daughter the best way that she can. And I think that's really a cool way of telling the story. Like you look at stuff like Our Flag Means Death, where like a lot of the becoming the pirate captain is running away from duty. And whether that duty is fair is a whole other conversation for Our Flag Means Death. But
yeah.
I really liked that this is not that. And then I loved that. I don't know if we ever get an age for Amina. I imagined her in like her 40s.
Yeah.
I don't. That's kind of just
So
like
did
what I was. And so I loved that as we get the like, I'm too old for this. She is still an amazing captain and an amazing pirate.
Yeah.
Like not just in terms of like the physical side of it, but she's smart, she's clever, she's like all of these great traits that you want for a pirate story, and she embodies them so well. And it, like I'm hopeful that we get more in this series because I want to see her mess up more stuff, like mess up in a good way, mess up more stuff, wreck more people. Like she's such an awesome character.
As someone who grew up absolutely obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean, and in particular the scene in the third one where Elizabeth becomes the pirate king and it's like leading them all into battle and like jumps up on the rigging and yells listen, just like her screaming listen, like that scene in particular, I feel like this was just made for like the adult who grew up obsessed with those things.
Yeah,
Um, it's
100%.
really awesome seeing an older character being such a cool character. Um, she's so cool. I think it's great seeing all these mistakes and things that she made as a younger person, coming back for a reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I love seeing like what a good and loving and protective mother she is, but also having her own desires and things that are sometimes at odds with her motherhood, and just like her figuring out how to be dealing with that. Um, yeah, she's just a real fascinating character.
Mm-hmm.
And a fascinating main character needs a good villain. What are your thoughts on Falco?
Falco Punch. Falco's cool. I feel like he's kind of quintessential magical villain that like clearly does not understand the scope of what he's trying to do. And I love a good story where like he gets kind of defeated by his own hubris. Um, and I think that that is very cool. I like that. Again, this guy kind of goes to Amina. I like that he's clever. I like that like we get like the introduction to magic early on, but then there's like a long pause where we're not sure if magic is real, from like a storytelling perspective. And I like that we kind of get these legends of Falco of like what actually is he doing, what is magic, what is coincidence, like what are all these things. And
Is it actually magic, or is it just science that people don't understand yet and are
yeah,
thusly writing off as magic?
yeah,
Which is the case with 20,000 Leagues.
yeah. Uh, so I think that that's really cool. This would not have worked for the format of the book, but I would have liked a couple of chapters on Falco himself, like from his perspective.
That'd
Again,
be a fun novella.
yeah, I don't know how that would fit into this story as a whole, but I think that that would be really cool. We could get something from like with Dunya, like at that point in time, um, and I think that would have been really interesting. But again, this is me nitpicking because so much of it was great. Here's something else I think would have been cool for this character.
Yeah, right there with you, Kate. Very good quintessential pirate enemy, like iconic, but well done. I'm trying to recall, what did they refer to? It's not a kraken, but it's kraken. The monster that he brought up. It's kind of like I'm forgetting what they called it in the book, but it's kind of like a kraken, but not. It's similar, but in this like in this world's mythos. It's that mythos own version of it. Um, it's great that they brought in that version of what it is, but also made it that this big fantasy sea monster is not doing the things it's doing, wrecking boats and things, of its own will. Uh, Falco is the one who's controlling it through his magic. That's a very, like, in many ways, stereotypical pirate villain thing to do, is go find a giant sea monster and control it. But kind of the way he attached himself to it and all of that is unique to this and fun. And that means there's a weakness of how to then sort of turn that monster against him, which is invisible, quote unquote, threads that you can then cut off and disconnect it, which is super cool. I kind of liked that he was foreigner in many ways. Um, in my head, I pictured him as the only white guy in this entire story because it made sense to me for whatever reason. Just a white guy coming and ruining things for everyone else. Um, we love you, Cameron. It's not all
I
white guys,
mean,
but like just in this case, like
historically, scoreboard.
historically, it's a lot of white guys coming through, messing things up. So in my head, he literally was the only white guy, and looking back, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That would track. um, Whether or not that was like actually what the author intended.
I
Um,
believe he was. I can't remember the word that she used to describe him now either, but I think in the front of the book it says that like he's a European.
Yeah, he is a Frank.
yeah,
That's the one.
which is part of where
Yeah.
I got the white guy thing
Yeah.
from. Um, but I feel like that plays into this really well. Uh, yeah, I thought he was great, and he really was his own downfall. And good on Dunya for playing his game to get back at him, because he thought he was winning and he wasn't.
I think he really did feel like a threat, um, which I think is necessary for a villain. Um, I think with it being Amina telling her story, there was never any doubt that she was going to beat him. But I was worried there for a bit. Like the first run in with him went very badly.
Yep.
Um, real bad. Um,
Not good.
and, and yeah, it was. He had amassed, I think, a lot more power than I had expected him to have. And yeah, he was a good villain. Did you have a favorite supernatural creature?
I really liked the bird people. Like they're so weird, and like, um, and as we get like Raksh, like his interactions with them as well as he's like this demon thing, something like that. Contract like doing all this stuff, and like he gets to the bird people, and they're like, "We're good." And I just love this idea of like we get to this other realm. There's this completely other like different hierarchy, and for some reason, bird people, and that was super cool. They're so weird, and I hope that again, if there's more in this series, I hope we get much more bird people. Uh, just because, yeah, it's so out there. I imagined them like the owlings from Strixhaven in Magic the Gathering. So like there are all these like kind of chubby owls just like walking around doing their thing,
Yeah.
and it was very cool. Also, shout out to the Kraken.
Yeah. I kind of pictured the bird people like the bird creature from Zelda. I think from the Shadow Wolf game. I kind of pictured them all kind of like that, but as parrots, instead of whatever. Um, One of my favorite other things that they're just kind of described are the not starfish. They're starfish, but they're not. They're like fake things. I'm trying to forget or trying to find where they mention. As usual, love the crack. And then in this whole part where she's on the island, and it on another dimension almost full of them, full of the great little things. But big fan of the Kraken. I love it when the knot comes up in general. Oh, yeah. It is called talking about the
Ooh, the Merid.
the mare, because it's like it's squid octopusy, but then it's got like crab claws as well. I think, and it's kind of cool. Big fan of that. And then Falco's people, I like Davy Jones people from Pirates of the Caribbean, which is great. Loved that mental image. Favorite was picturing these people as that, where they have, different body parts that are sea animal body parts. So some of them have crab arms and shark teeth and things, and that was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ultimately the not starfish, the jellyfish clouds, were my favorite to imagine on the island. They're just like random little things, never really important, but they're just there to establish how weird a place is at.
Yeah, there were lots of weird things to imagine. The whole Bird Island thing was so strange. I so weird. It was like pirate stuff, and then suddenly everything was like I didn't know if it was real or not, or if we were hallucinating this
Mm-hmm.
whole thing. Like
Is this a
it
fever
got
dream?
it got so weird, and then it was indeed
It
just
was.
weird.
Yeah.
Um, I was picturing them more like harpies.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think my favorite supernatural being was probably Raksh. Um, obviously, such a troublemaker
Mm-hmm.
being, like a chaos being.
Yeah. He's chaotic selfish. Is
But
like
Yep.
his vibe.
he
Or
was
technically
so
he's chaotic
fun.
neutral, but neutral is replaced with selfish.
And I'm like, of course I'm going to be a sucker for like the super dark love interest.
With questionable morals.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just gotta choose chaos.
Yeah.
That's all.
As played by Tom Hiddleston.
Yep.
No complaints here. Um,
As
all
we're on the
right.
Bird Island, I also imagined in the movie that part's animated. Like the whole rest of the
Ooh, that
movie
would
is
be
live action,
cool.
and then the Bird Island is like old school, like Mary Poppins, like 2D
Yeah.
animated, where
Yeah.
like Amina is still live action, but like everything
Yeah.
around her is 2D, is like 2D animated, and so
And it's almost like the switch in The Wizard of Oz.
yeah, exactly. It's like that type of vibe, and yeah, that's kind of how like I imagined it in my head.
All right. Who was your favorite crew member?
Of Dahlia, who just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to blow things up and put question food. I'm mostly just here for the part where he discovers gunpowder. It's like, yeah, I want to do things with the gunpowder. And I mean, like, Dahlia, no, stop,
Stop blowing holes in my ship.
don't do it. And has to be the voice of reason for the practically a child who's been handed fire and explosive things, because it's pure chaos. And it's just like, yeah, and then it ends up coming in handy in several sentences. Gets stolen. Um, but just basically having her run around like an actual child, and Amina having to be like, no, you're gonna actually cause more problems than solutions for us if someone doesn't keep an eye on. But also, there's a reason I have you around.
Yeah.
So Dahlia.
Yeah. Dahlia is mine as well. A lot of the same reasons as what Emma said. Only thing I really have to add is I did like Dahlia as the like, how do normal people fight against these monsters? Explosives.
Explosives.
And I like kind of even going to what Emma said earlier of like, is it magic or is it just science we don't understand? Like
Yes.
Dahlia's over here like, I'm not sure how this works, but it goes boom. Like we're gonna put it in these bombs and figure this out. Like,
I
because
know
like
it
they would have,
explodes when you add
yeah,
fire to it, so.
exactly. It's like because they have cannons, so like they're more
Yeah.
than familiar with that. But just like in terms of like packaged gunpowder, basically, of
Yeah.
like I think that was so cool. And she's kind of like Rock. She's just such chaos. And
Yeah.
again, I don't think we get ages for characters, but I imagined her in like her 60s of
Yeah.
old grandma, like old enough to be Amina's mom kind of thing, and
Yep.
she's just over here, this kid in the corner, like, ooh, gunpowder,
Yeah.
and just trying not to blow things up.
Yeah.
She was also my favorite. She's so entertaining. And the relationship between her and Amina was also entertaining, where they're both okay, just shooting super straight with each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, so you finally come to visit me for a cup of tea. You know I'm here for more than that, Dahlia.
All right. Any standout moments?
The end. My favorite stand-up moment is learn that the scribe writing down story Dunya as whatever his name is,
Jamal.
Jamal. I loved that. It was such a nice little addition to really play into that character development, that story of just like for both Amina and Jamal. And that is one of my favorites. It made me very like there is an ending to that story, and speaks especially for where that could have gone with the cultures that this story is set in. So
I liked the Kraken fight. I loved was referenced earlier, the representation for how Falco's magic works. And I love that, like, after Amina comes back, she has the ability to, like, see the threads of his, like, contracts, um, which I love is also similar to Raksha's magic. Like, they both kind of work off of the agreement side of things. And I love that you have all of these, like, sea creature, like, crewmen now, but, like, if you're able to separate them from the thread tying them to Falco, the magic goes away. And so I really like how that all connects. And then the idea of like the Kraken is bound through all of these spells that are holding it to Falco. And as Amina's able to sever more and more of them, it like sets the creature free. Um, I'm also a sucker for like kaiju stories where like the kaiju is not the bad guy; it's misunderstood.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I like this idea that like it is being controlled and forced to do all of this against its will. And so setting it free was also hype.
Yeah, I agree. The same for me. And then I think also the rest of that, where it's free from Falco, but still then bound to Amina out of obligation for saving her. And then once they're even, then it's like truly free. Um, yeah, I think Amina being able to see those threads of magic was a really cool moment. Like, oh, like whatever happened on that island, like
Mm-hmm.
things are wild now. Um, yeah, just a lot of exciting things. like Raksh wanted to make her a legend, and it's gonna be happening whether she wants it to or not. Um, did you have any dislikes?
To what you said earlier, I would have liked something from Taco's perspective, or thought of this. What would have been kind of cool was, I mean, there's this whole thread where Amina realizing that if Falco achieves what he's setting out to do, then her daughter is going to be affected by him getting the moon of Saba and setting it off. I it would have been kind of cool to see even just like a 2-page blurb once he gets it, sort of pulls the guy out from himself, like a flashback to her daughter at home with the grandmother, like having something her like seeing her actually be impacted by it in some way, shape, or form. Because Rush also makes it clear that like he would be impacted, hates the idea of this guy getting because he's directly impacted by it. We know that her daughter's his child as well. So like even just like I guess that's kind of a dislike because that's her driving factor is giving her daughter a better life. So being able to see at least go back to her daughter in that peak of like you're like we actually see her dead by.
Um, I don't necessarily have anything direct, and I feel like this is the I'm not a writer, so like I don't know how else you would do this criticism. This is kind of the same thing as like my criticism from like the beginning of Darker Shades of Magic, in the sense of like I feel like it takes us a little bit to like get into the story, but I also don't know how you do the character building and the world building without that. Like, like I said, like we get like literally the beginning of the book is the introduction to like, hey, these magical things are real, and then we go like a third of the book, I think, without seeing more magic or any like confirmed like magic. And so like that kind of felt like a long time to me. But during that time, we're building up the crew, we're building up Amina, we're building up like the quest. But for like for how fantasy it ends, it just is kind of weird to me that we go through like such a huge chunk of the book without magic. But again, I don't know how you would introduce that in a way that isn't taking away from the story of these character building.
For me, for this question, I got nothing. No notes. It was a 5-star read for me. Can't even nitpick anything. It was all I could have wanted. Um, so there was a lot of themes of family and motherhood throughout. What are your thoughts on that?
Also, just and
Can you move your mic a little closer to you? It seemed like Discord's not
hello.
like picking you up
Hello.
sometimes because you're not
Hello.
lighting up. So
No. Okay. So just like chosen family and or being a parent um, can be very strong motivators for people in lots of cases, and it shines through very clearly in this book that having both chosen family and kids are in fact what motivate a lot of people to do things. either for good or for bad. Um, they can, family can end up making you push them away or, pull you closer. And I feel like that was represented, both ends of the spectrum for family and parenthood were shown really well in the book of Mina's daughter and Dunya, being both ends of like how and parenthood impact.
Yeah. Like I said at the top, I like that Amina's like motherhood doesn't take away, like it's her motivating factor, and like I like that it is like that this desire to protect her daughter is why she's going on this adventure. And I like that we are constantly reminded of her motherhood, but it's in a way that is, I need to make sure that I'm safe so that I can get back to my daughter who needs a mother. And I think that that was really cool. It was a good way of like giving us a pirate adventure story without taking, or without it being just like, I'm Amina, I don't care about my kid. And so then obviously also they have the tie-in with Raksh once we meet him and find that out as well. Kind of this idea that Amina has been living in this magical world and not known it. Well, she knew it for Raksh, but like she did not know it about her daughter. And so I think that that was a really cool tie-in as well, and brings back it ties in that familiar theme into the main story, even though Amina's daughter is not part of the main adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think for like blood family and like you said, Emma, chosen family, like it talks, it shows so much of both of those things and just how your love for people affects your motivation and your reasoning and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, Thoughts on representation in the novel? Um, we obviously have a main character who is a woman of color, um, which is awesome. Uh, yeah, what are your thoughts?
I love the twist of Jamal being a trans man. Of that, like that's not like we're building up. Why don't they want to get married? And it's not until the very end that we find out that, again, from an audiobook perspective, this other voice has been with us for the whole story. And I think that that's really cool. It was a great way of including that and including representation that um, and tying that into why they ran away, of like Jamal fleeing isn't just I don't want to get married or I want to go find the moon of Saba. It's I cannot live that life, even though that life might be comfortable. I have to live true to myself. And so I thought that was very cool and a very good tie-in. And then, as Emma said, it sure is interesting that the one like confirmed white person is the villain who ruins everything.
Yep.
I'm sure that's not based on anything in specific.
Not at all.
But yeah, loved all the different cultures. Loved getting to see all of that as well.
Yeah, 100%. This felt a lot like there was a lot of effort put into making the story about and by and for people who are not what is represented normally and on average in the media, which is, typically white younger people. And it was just great to see an older woman of color in the lead, and then have, literally, as you said, it's weird that the bad guy is confirmed to be a white dude. Like, it's just weird. And probably based on a lot of things, you know? Um, and it was just fabulous to see the all of the different cultures talked about within this that also aren't normally explored within media. There's been for a long time fascination with Greek and Egyptian mythos. Those two come to mind specifically, and Nordic. But then this really dives into stuff from the Indian Ocean and around there. There was a brief reference to the Golden Fleece, which is Greek, if I am not mistaken, but that was just a brief reference, and nothing else. And so it's cool to see that those things are still acknowledged and referred to, um, but having the main focus be a culture and stories and legends that are not as familiar to the media.
Yeah, I think there is a quote that really captures the heart behind representation. I think in this novel, but also in media in general. I think um, Raksh is talking to Amina and telling her how he's going to make her a legend and just do like great things with her. Um, and Amina is thinking it wasn't this accursed demon or spirit of discord or whatever he called himself putting alien desires in my soul. I wanted to travel the world and sail every sea. I wanted to have adventures, to be a hero, to have my tales told in courtyards and street fairs, where perhaps kids who'd grown up like me, with more imagination than means, might be inspired to dream, where women who were told there was only one sort of respectful life for them could listen to tales of another who'd broken away and thrived when she'd done so. I wanted to show Marjana that. Not now, but when she was older, when it was safer. I wanted to teach my daughter to read the waves and the night sky, to see her eyes widen with wonder and curiosity when I brought her to new places, new cities. I wanted to give her all that I'd had to take, positioning her to enjoy opportunities I could never imagine.
Adding to that, a quote that I liked is, um, "For this scribe has read a great many of these accounts and taken away another lesson, that to be a woman is to have your story misremembered, discarded, twisted." And I like that that's kind of played for jokes at like the beginning of the book, of like Amina is this legendary pirate that clearly has like all these tall tales about her, and then it ties so heavily into like the quote that you just read, Shanine, that like it's like yes, but like this is there's so much like truth in that, and it was very cool to kind of see that theme play out throughout the novel.
All right. Any thoughts on faith in the novel?
I think Amina is a great example of someone who has messed up in their life and continues on a journey of self realization and wanting to do better within, their faith, and not getting discouraged by the fact that she is just human and going to make mistakes within, what her faith presents to her as a good life. And even when she does recognize that the life she leads is iffy by lots of standards, Like, she can do better and take steps towards being a better person. Like, for example, not drinking anymore, um, which is something so little and yet can, make a big difference. And even continuing with her prayers and encouraging her crewmates to do the same, whether they are of the same or different faiths. So I think that's really cool to have that represented of, like, even though you are a human who's going to make mistakes doesn't mean that you are not allowed to continue on this path of improving yourself within your belief system.
There's a cool quote from Shannon on the wiki. So who knows if this is true? There's a source, but but when talking about Amina's faith, Shannon said it's an intrinsic part of my religion and my journey. I wanted to show that you can fail and you can do terrible things and you can still even struggle, but that's okay. And I loved that. Like, it's very cool to have a Islamic focused like pirate story as part of being set in this world. As again, we're very used to Caribbean, like that side of things, and so I thought that was very cool. And yeah, I liked that we also still get to get a lot of the great common themes with that of like, how do you deal with the bad things you've done in your life? How do you deal with your mistakes? What does all of that look like? And I really liked that we get to have Amina as this middle-aged character that's dealing with the struggles of like not just how she wants to live in the future, but can I be saved because of how I've lived in the past? And I think that that's like such a cool story and a great thing when every hero isn't the 15-year-old farm kid or whatever. Like, and so I liked that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's another interesting aspect of having an older main character is them having gone through struggles already. Um, and I think she's a really good representation of someone who's maybe had a bit of a rockier faith journey as well. Maybe someone who has not always necessarily like wanted to have faith, um, who's ignoring it either out of a desire to do other things or out of necessity to cope with the things that they have done, um, but still always coming back to faith because it's so like hard boiled into you. Um, like not necessarily out of indoctrination, but out of conviction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, just coming to terms with those convictions and the life that you have lived. Um, yeah, it's another interesting part of Amina. And I enjoyed that we got to see like a couple other faiths as
Mm-hmm.
well, and that as the captain, like she encouraged that in her crew members. Um,
I agree.
all right. Were there any other themes that stood out to you?
I think a minor one that stood out is that chaos isn't always a bad thing. Like, you can get good. There's good that you can get from chaos. I mean, we see that in Dahlia a lot. Is I feel like Dahlia really is a chaotic good character deep down, even though she may seem like a chaotic neutral. Um, so that's it's like a very minor one, but yeah.
Um, I do like the idea of like quest for knowledge and forbidden knowledge as a theme. Like we get this of like what's myth versus what's reality. Like we find out that a lot of Jamal's like family has been like treasure hunters, and so but are they? Like again, that's kind of in the like not magic portion of the book. And so it's
Yeah.
like how much do they actually know? Like all of that was really cool. And so I like that idea of like the scribe being such an important part of the story because they have found that piece of knowledge that others have not.
And they apparently have a family gin.
Yes.
So,
Which I didn't even know was a thing in some cultures, but that's kind of fun.
anything else that stood out to you or any other quotes to share?
Um, I have a quote. It's a paragraph that kind of sums up the whole magic thing. Um, Only a few months ago, I had stood in my fishing boat, fending off a bat-winged demon and haranguing, haranguing the young men from Aden about the dangers of the magical world. Now I was trapped on an island of air elementals, reunited with the supernatural spouse I'd tried to kill, and having tea with a man who had wings for arms while my crew was being held prisoner by a sorcerer. That was all terrible enough. And I just think that's a great summary of the book that wouldn't be funny unless you read up to that point. But it's just like fun to put it in that perspective of like sometimes reality is stranger than fiction, and a lot of the time you just gotta summarize it to realize that yeah, the world we live in is really a weird one where things really are stranger than we could ever think of.
Uh, I don't have anything else like specific. I'll save it for final thoughts.
Okay. I have one quote that I thought was funny. Um, a little madness goes a long way in convincing men that you might stab them if they step out of line.
Should have seen it coming.
Who'd have thought?
All right. Final thoughts.
I've already recommended this book to other people. And
Yeah.
so my sister-in-law and I have been swapping some book recommendations, and I sent this her way as she was looking for something new. And so definitely a great read, big recommendation, and it's such a fun pirate story. And Amina is a great protagonist.
I'm gonna say this now. This is an S tier book for me.
Ooh.
High praise book. Loved it, and I want more. So S tier will absolutely also be recommending this to other people. I already have a few people who I'm gonna be texting about it and telling them to go read it because I know they would like it.
Yes, I finished this book and immediately wanted more, and then was so happy to find out that it is supposed to be a trilogy. So,
Yay!
yes, so
That's
excited.
exciting.
Uh,
That makes me so happy.
she was doing an AMA on her Instagram about the next installment, um, which is going to focus, I think she said, largely on Dahlia's relationship with Amina and her history and things. So that will be very fun. Um, yeah.
And I feel like
I-
I saw she's already like 70K words into the sequel. I think that was
Could be.
what I saw. I'm trying to remember. Yes, yes. I'm scrolling back through our podcast Instagram chat. Yes, finally hit 70K words in the Amina sequel. And so I'm so happy that it's not just like I have some ideas. It's like no, we have 70K words down. Like we're ready to go.
Yes, I too have recommended this to people. I can't stop talking about it. It's so good. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good.
All right. With that, our next book club, we're officially in the summer months. And for anyone who is a longtime partaker of First Geeks Book Club, knows that I like to do themed summers. Our theme this summer is Hefty Tome Summer, where we are going to be taking both months to read one thick book.
One big chunk.
Big chonker. This boy, right here. We're going to be reading chapters 1 to 35, that is the end of 35, of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, which we will be discussing on July 25th.
I have started the audiobook. I am 4.5 hours in of the 16 hours that I have to be for the first half. So
farther
Fabulous.
than me.
We're making progress.
I'm on like page 20.
And I am about to start the audiobook because I have the hard copy in storage. I've talked about this before. I have the hard copy that I started reading years ago. It is currently in storage in Colorado. So I'm not going to buy another hard copy when I know I already have the book. So I'm going to do the audiobook. And then if I get the chance, I'm going to get the book out of storage when I'm in Colorado next. So, you know.
Right. But this has been sitting on my TBR for literal years. So I'm very excited to finally be forcing everyone to read it with me.
And we're happy to help.
Always.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for joining us for our book club on the Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. We are First Geek 411 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Join our Discord server. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Check out our Redbubble store and watch live on our Twitch and find all our videos over on YouTube. I am Hoot and Howl Tales on Instagram and Threads.
I am not prepared with an I in the prepared on pretty much all platforms that are common amongst people. Yeah.
And I'm Humar Whittle. You can find me around the internet with that name. Threads, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, all those things. It's been a great week.
Read a book.
A good time.
Sail the high seas.
Yeah.